Well, hi, good evening, and welcome everybody to the show. It's Paul English Live here on a Tuesday. You're thinking, what's going on a Tuesday? Well, we got a little bit of a change tonight. This is Paul English Live, episode 120. I'm here with Sven Longshanks for the next couple of hours. Glad that you could join us. Let's start the show. And it's chilly out here. I don't know what it's like with you guys. It's chilly here. I think it's chilly everywhere. And I had to put extra underwear on for tonight's show. Yeah, it's cold out there, something like that. It is. We got down to 0 degrees today, and we also had a little bit of snow. How about that? There's not been any snow down here for about 18 years. I think the last time I saw it was about 2007. We saw some snow, and it lasted for about 12 minutes. Not that I was out there with a stopwatch. That's a bit tedious, isn't it? But we've got it forecast large and lovely for Thursday and Friday down here on the south coast, which is outrageous, really. So down to 0 degrees. They've taken all our degrees off of us. The heating's chugging away in the house. I've got a hot cup of tea here, and I've got a really great guest along tonight, Sven Longshanks. Sven, good evening to you. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Paul. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me on. It's been very cold here as well. We've got snow here up in Wales. And I used to have to put an extra layer of clothing on when it got cold, but after being in prison, I now have an extra layer of fat, so I don't need to wear the extra clothing.
Yeah, I did notice on some of your photos that I think when you were on with Mark the other week, he remarked, and I think in a personal call I've had with you since then, that you were looking, what's the word, healthier, should we say? I'm being very kindly to you. You were looking, you look well. You did look well in those photographs. I thought you kind of looked better for it in a way. I don't know. So you're more sort of, should I use the word cuddly, or is that appalling? Have I overstepped the line? I don't know.
That's fair enough. I did put weight on. It also made me lose a lot of hair as well. Everybody in there, all their hair falls out, I guess, where you haven't got so much sunlight and you're sort of just kept indoors. And you tend to eat a lot and you're not very active, so you put the weight on and your hair falls out. So it does sort of change the way that people look. But I could have done with putting a bit of weight on anyway, so it's not something that
I could have given you a bit of mine if I'd have known. You could have had a bit of mine. We could have done a swap. Yeah, we could have absolutely done a swap. So it would have, worked out a little bit better. But no, the hair thing as well. I don't know. I'm in my mid-60s now, Sven, so it doesn't really sort of count as much, I think. But I've hung on to most of mine for most of my life, but it's just about all gone. So by now, which is a bit much, really. But there we go. Actually, just forgive me for a second, because I've just got a technical doodad here that's just taking place. And I don't know why it does this, but sometimes we have a little dropout on a feed. So everything's getting recorded here at this end. Not to worry about that, but let me just press a button here because I've got a little problem. But yeah, anyway, not that this is a hair loss special, is it? I don't think we're going to be talking about that too much. It's not about that, is it?
Well, you can say that when your hair falls out, it's related to high testosterone. So if your hair does fall out and you're young, you can say, well, that's because I'm a high testosterone alpha male. That's why my hair's falling.
Yeah, well, that's good. Actually, my what's been going on recently, my son came up to me the other week and said, Dad, what you need is more testosterone. I said, are you kidding me? I'm from bloody Yorkshire. We don't need any more. I've got enough as it is. So I'm taking some things that I think are from beef's testicles, bull's testicles. I don't know why.
Really?
I'm easily persuaded by this stuff. Yeah, they just said, have some, get some beef testicle stuff sorted out. So that's what we've kind of done. And apparently it's supposed to give me lots of youthful vigor and all that kind of stuff. But I thought I had plenty of that to start off with. And I saw something the other day where some guy round about my age was saying, receiving health advice from people that are 40 years younger than you is not sensible. I don't know what it is as a bloke. I mean, I've mentioned this before here on the show. I think if you're a guy, you think you're 26 forever or something. And then you hit a certain age and no matter how much you resist it, you realise that you're not. So, but you've had physically, I guess, quite a challenge there. And for people that don't know you, and many of the audience here, I think some will, but many won't. A quick recap, maybe. I don't know whether you're sick of doing this. You must have been inundated all the time. But a quick recap of events in your life, and we can go back further at other points of the show, but certainly the last 2 or 3 years for you have been challenging, I think is a good word to throw in there.
Yeah. Well, I guess you could start with, I started off doing Radio Stormer, and that's when I first met you, Paul, and you helped to set up the server and the radio station, and you were a great help at that. And,
when's that? When did we do that?
I think that was around about 2013.
Good grief. It was.
Yeah, because I think in 2014 I was doing area narrations. I forget what I called it then, maybe just Radio Stormer narrations, something like that. And I was doing audiobooks. I started off doing audiobooks and then interviews with Andrew Anglin, interviews with various others. And you said that's good, that we can, you should set up a radio station. I can help you do that. So you did that. And then ended up having creative differences with Andrew Anglin. And so it stopped being called Radio Stormer, and then it was Radio Aryan. And Radio Aryan sort of branched out on its own and stopped being republished at Daily Stormer, and that was in 2017, I think. And then as I say, it was Radio Aryan. And then in 2019, I got arrested for the content that I had made just as we were changing over from Radio Stormer to Radio Aryan.
Right.
So it was sort of, I didn't really change the editorial policy that we had when we were working with the Daily Stormer. And obviously their policy was pretty much to use offensive language, I guess you can put it that way.
Really? I hadn't noticed, Sven. I read lots of their articles. I hadn't noticed that. It must have gone by my eyes. Yeah, it was a little bit lively. Let's put it that way. It was. Yeah, it traded on that to some degree.
Also, I mean, at that time, if you look at the internet, there were lots of memes going around the internet that you just wouldn't see today. This was before there was the atrocity in New Zealand, and the sort of right-wing nationalist attacks really weren't heard of. I think it was the Dylan Roof thing.
Yeah,
that was about it. And a lot of the memes that were around at the time, I mean, they're just joking that people are just putting out stuff to shock people. And there was this concept of, I guess we could swear on here, the shit lord and shit posting. And there was effectively just trying to wind people up with the things that you said, trying to be extreme, trying to make the opposition be absolutely mortified and terrified and think that we were 10 times bigger than we were, 10 times worse than we were. And that's what the internet was like at the time. And my content, the Radio Aryan content, was nothing really like that. It was really quite mild. That's why everybody was shocked that I was arrested for it. But
it's because you're British, Sven. That's why you're mild.
Yeah,
we are. We're a bit more. We are, and we are. Yeah.
So I got arrested in 2019 for content that I made in 2017, going up to the start of 2019. And in it, just before I got arrested, a month before I got arrested, I'd been working with Mark Collette in that summer, putting on a conference and unveiling Patriotic Alternative for the world to see, and this new organisation. And through working with Mark, he was saying, look, that name Radio Aryan, you're going to come into problems with that because you're not going to be able to rehabilitate the word Aryan in people's minds. It doesn't say like noble, honourable people. It just brings up images of neo-Nazis in World War II. And he was quite correct in saying that, although the root word does go back to being noble and honourable. And that's what we wanted convey. It was a noble and honourable project that we were doing, basically, by doing this radio, trying to help people and trying to encourage people to be a good example to others, be a good example, be a good nationalist, and help out your community, that sort of thing. But I was tending to use what would be considered racial slurs. I was abbreviating the word Pakistani. I was using a scientific word for black people, which, although it can still be used in a scientific uses, when you use that and you also add thug on the end of it, then that can be considered to be a racial slur as well, which is what they said in the court. So the jury decided that these were racial slurs. So they decided that, therefore, I had used insulting language, and to insult someone is one of the definitions of hate. It's to threaten, abuse, or insult is what they use. So if you say anything insulting about a racial minority, then you're inciting hate. Therefore, that's against the law. So I challenged that because I thought, well, people insult each other all the time. At work, you have banter, and I wasn't trying to insult anybody with the content that I was making. In fact, it was quite explicit on there. Like, look, we're making content for other nationalists. We don't want to offend people. If you don't really know about these subjects, then you can always just switch the website off. We're not trying to reach out to you. We're trying to talk to other nationalists. Yes. And that defense didn't really go down in the court. But I'm getting ahead of myself by talking about the court, because it didn't actually end up in court until 2023. So you think I was arrested in 2019 for content in 2017. Then we had COVID. Then we had the barristers' strike. So I didn't actually end up going to court over this until 2023, 4 years later. And of course, by that time, I thought, they're going to drop this because they can see the website has not gone in a direction of inciting violence on the streets of Britain. It's gone in completely the other direction, and trying to make the content as widely accessible as possible. What we talk about is quite sensible. It's just common sense stuff. And you don't have to be white to understand it. You don't have to be white to sympathize with it and the things that are going on. In actual fact, the same or similar things are going on all around the world with liberalism, basically, and feminism, and the destruction of the family. All sorts of stuff. It's not just immigration problems that we face. So the content that we were making, it was trying to reach out to everybody, not trying to offend people, but trying to get people to say, well, yeah, I agree with that. You're doing the right thing. And yes, you should be speaking up for your people in that way, just the same as we speak up for our people. Blacks speak up for blacks, Muslims speak up for Muslims. When we speak up for whites, we get accused of being Nazis and racists and all the rest of it. So I thought, well, they can't really say that this is incitement to hate, because clearly the opposite of hate is what's been encouraged. And you can see that the direction of the website has gone from Radio Aryan to Radio Albion, not using racial slurs. And this was all the direction that we were heading in before I'd even got arrested. That's why it was so ridiculous. But then they had the trial, and that went on for 2 weeks. And it was 15 charges, 15 podcasts, which they played pretty much in full. Right. In court. They did some talking between my barrister and the prosecution barrister, and they all decided that some bits were irrelevant, and they were just talking about trans issues, I think. So it was like only a couple of minutes from a few podcasts were missing, because they wanted to sort of limit the time, because I really wanted to play other podcasts and say, look, this is the other content that's on the website. But they said, well, the trial would go on for months then. We have to limit it because we're limited by time. So we're just going to play the whole podcast, not one section of it, not one sentence, because the first judge that I was up against, he wanted them just to play the sentence with me using this language. And both the prosecution and the defense were saying, well, you can't do that. It's important that we hear the context.
Yes.
That's not following the law through if you don't hear the context of what's being said. And the judge was, well, I'm not having him standing up there expounding his vile views from the pulpit of the courtroom and all this sort of thing. And my defense barrister was saying, well, look, the whole point of him is for him to defend himself and show that he's not inciting hate. So he's not likely to be inciting hate to the jury, because the whole point of him mounting a defense is to show that that's not what he's doing. So it was a bit strange, and also as if this judge had already prejudged me in effect, and just assumed that I was guilty. So I was quite pleased when I found out that that wasn't going to be the judge that was going to be hearing my case. It was going to be one of the other judges at Swansea. There are two main judges, and it was the other one that heard my case. As I say, it was 15 charges against me. Originally, they wanted to give me 8 years when they handed the charges to me, and they said that's because it's the most serious of all, because so many people listen to it.
How much did they want to give you? What did they say?
8 years. Yeah, 8 years, 6 to 8 years is what they wanted to give me, because it was popular. According to them, if you're popular, then that makes the offence so much worse, because so many more people have listened to it. But effectively, it's saying, well, if what you're doing is popular, we're going to really throw the book at you. Whereas what they really should be saying is, well, if what they're saying is popular, quite clearly it's not inciting hate, is it? Nobody's going to want to listen to somebody just like encouraging them to hate people, are they? You know, it's not going to be popular. It's not going to be something people want to listen to.
Absolutely not.
They don't look logically like that. So 15 charges against me, and I beat them on 5, which I was really pleased about. And it was the King's Own Counsel, a silk barrister, like the top barrister in the land, that I was put up against. So I was very pleased that I beat him on 5 of them, but I lost on 10 of them. And then when it came to sentencing, he'd already said that he wanted to give me years and not months. And he took some time off for my health conditions, and he took some time off for the delay because of COVID and the barrister strike. And he ended up giving me 2.5 years, which is better than 8 years, obviously. If I'd have pled guilty, because at the time when they had arrested me, they said, oh, if you plead guilty, you'll only have to do 2/3 of that. Right. So if I plead guilty, you'll give me 6 years. You know, I'm not. There's no way I'm pleading guilty, because I don't think I'm guilty anyway. But that's up for a jury to decide. Yeah, whether I am or not in a speech case. It's up to them to decide whether it's illegal speech or whether it is free speech within the confines of the British idea of what free speech is. So for them to give me 2.5 years, it was obviously much better than 6 years if I'd pled guilty. And then I did 1 year and 3 months in the prison. And then out of the prison, I did another 1 year and 3 months on license. About 90% of that time was spent in the hostel, the probation hostel. Right. Which is kind of strange, because they kept saying to me, oh, you've got to find somewhere to live. You've got to get out of this hostel. And then Sam Mealer, who's in the same situation as me, he's got somewhere to live. He's got a family to live. And they kept him in the hostel for as long as possible and said he couldn't go back to his family. So it's really the whole probation system just seems to be there to cause you as much difficulty as possible and as much annoyance as possible. Yeah. They're supposed to be preventing you from reoffending, but I don't see how they're preventing me from reoffending by preventing me from using Amazon. I had to get my parents to purchase things from the internet for me, because I wasn't able to use the shops on the internet. The first 3 or 4 months. And I'm not very mobile. I do all my shopping online. So I was, really stuck there. And yet my offence was publishing content. So, I mean, all they really had to do is say, well, you're not allowed to publish anything on your website. We'll check your website every day to see if you have. And you can use the rest of the internet. I mean, that would have made sense to me. But of course, to them, oh no, that's giving you far too much chance to reoffend. We have to ban you from the whole internet. So for the whole time that I was on license, I wasn't allowed to use any social media accounts. So, of course, that made that very difficult for me to talk to my friends, because they all use social media and they're from all around the world. So effectively just cut me off from everybody for 1.5 years. While I was in prison, I had loads of people writing to me. So, and I had a laptop as well. I didn't have access to the internet, but I had a laptop. I could respond to emails, I could access my bank account there, I could purchase things that I wanted. So in a way, it was like I had more freedom when I was in prison than when I came out under probation. And I just think they're sort of overly cautious, probation are. And I think the way that they look at it is, if you were to offend, then we would look really, really bad having allowed that to happen. So in order to prevent that from happening, we'll just do a complete overkill and prevent you from doing anything at all. And if you want to get that changed, you have to get a legal representative to change it, because it's no good you saying, well, the Public Order Act doesn't apply at a private gathering, because it's you that is telling them that. But if it's a barrister or a solicitor that says to them, the Public Order Act doesn't apply at a private gathering, then I think there's more chance that they might have to change those conditions, because they do say that the conditions are supposed to be preventative and not punitive. And that's like an overriding guideline for all of probation. They're not supposed to be punishing people. They're just supposed to be preventing reoffending. But it did seem they went over the top with me. But so now I'm free of all my conditions, and I'm back making podcasts again. My co-hosts at Radio Albion, they kept that going for me for the whole 2.5 years.
Yeah, they did great. I was wondering how that was all carrying on, whilst it was good that was good that they were able to step in there and keep it ticking over, because every now and again I pick up shows from there, Parish of the Patriots and these other things, and listen, they're good. There's good quality stuff. It's for a particular market, like you say, or a particular niche of people, which is larger now, I suspect, than it was 5 years ago when all your troubles began, in many ways. But things are they're changing all the time, and probably in ways that none of us can fully anticipate, but they are. There was a question actually in the chat, but I think you might have already answered this. Alice Gorgeous, the lady with the great name, says, "Did you have a jury trial?" I think you said that you did.
Right? It was a jury. Yeah. It was a jury trial, and that was interesting as well, because it was 10-2 that they took a majority verdict of 10-2. So there were two people there that were saying either we're not certain or this man is not guilty. And while they were out having their deliberating, there was a note that was sent in to the judge, and it said one of our jury thinks that this isn't hate speech and it's a free speech issue, and he wants to know where free speech comes into this, because nobody's mentioned it. And the judge said, well, you're not here to decide if it's free speech. You're here to decide if it's incitement to hate, which I thought was the wrong thing. I thought that he should have said, well, if you think it's free speech, quite clearly it's not incitement to hate, is it? So you need to say not guilty. But the judge didn't say that. He said, you're here to decide if it's hate speech.
Yeah. There's a new program in their language, isn't there? There's a new program that's running. They're all anxious. Even, you're talking about the probation situation. As you were talking about, I'm thinking about what these probation officers are like. I don't know, and I'm not particularly keen to find out, obviously, but it's as if there's a chain of anxiety running through their own system. No one dare go against anything else, and you begin to see how this sort of leveraging of power or influence or control over others through these structures takes place. They don't step out. The other thing, I'm being naive here intentionally, right? I always thought, you're about to correct me, but with a jury trial, if one juror doesn't go for it, then it doesn't stand. The charge can't stand. If only one says no, the whole thing about jury trials, and we know that we've had recent news, haven't we, about them? We would like to get rid of these. I'm to which we think around here. Well, I certainly do. Yeah, I bet you would. Whether they've got any force or not, but obviously that's not the case. So this was a major. If 7 had said yes and 5 had said no, it would have still gone through, would it? The conviction. I don't know.
This happened, I think, in the 60s when they got rid of execution, and they got rid of being able to give people the death sentence. They also, at the same time, they stopped needing to have a unanimous vote from the jury, because before it was, if one person said, well, I'm not entirely convinced, and they would say, well, we can't convict this man because there's a possibility that there could be a wrongful conviction. And the concern that there might be a wrongful conviction was seen to be more important than convicting somebody. It was more important that an innocent man did not get sent to jail. They would prefer that a guilty man was let off rather than an innocent man was sent to jail. That was the way that it was looked at. And then what they changed it in the 60s when they stopped the death sentence, they also changed it so that they can accept majority verdicts, which of course means that you're not being convicted beyond all reasonable doubt, because a majority verdict means that somebody there is having doubts. And as I say, they two people had doubts in my trial, but they convicted me because 10 of them thought that I was guilty. And really, if you're talking about a speech issue, and that means that 10% of the jury is saying, well, I don't think this is insulting. I think this is humorous. And I would say that if one person thinks something is humorous, because humor is a subjective thing, isn't it? We're not all going to find the same kind of humor funny. Some people might be really offended at some kinds of humor, but if one person does find it funny, then the argument can be made that's humorous. That's not intended to insult. That's a joke, which is effectively what a lot of my content was. It was just trying to make people laugh.
Yes, it was. I remember at the time. I think, context and culture's important. I mean, here in these islands, verbal abuse of your best friends is standard behavior, isn't it? Isn't that really it's bad taste? If you're going out with your mates or even not with your mates, verbal abuse and being put down and sort of insulted just comes with the territory. Everybody knows what's going on because we've got this cultural sort of code of behavior. No one's going to go out and start beating hell out of one another just because they've thrown an insult around. You're supposed to joust back. It's all part of it. So, I mean, what passes for humour here, I think does put some people's noses out. I've seen a lot of videos recently of Americans that are touring England. They're very interesting. Maybe it's slightly egotistical on my part, but it's always good to have your home sort of reflected back to you through the eyes of someone who's new to it. And I know Americans are not necessarily totally new to England because they've been around English culture just as we've been around American culture, courtesy of the last 40, 50 years. But many of them have said that it took a while for them to understand the sheer dry, sarcastic sense of humour that the English possess in practically all situations. It's just a way that we deal with things. I'm not saying that this is specifically, where your communications were going, but without, I know, glib to say it in a way, but without context, how can you evaluate the content? Well, you can't. But of course, they sought to do that, it seems to me, to some degree,
Well, one of the things I always used to be taught when I was at school is you break my bones, but words will never hurt me. There's a little rhyme there, and I forgot the beginning of it, but it's
sticks and stones.
Sticks and stones. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, which is effectively saying, look, it doesn't matter what words somebody comes out with, it doesn't matter what insults somebody comes out with, you don't react to it. And as you're a child, you learn not to react to things. You learn not to punch out at things. And you're taught, and that's the British way, is to have tolerance for other people having a differing point of view to yourself. And that's the way that I was brought up. And the way that it is now is, oh, no, words are the equivalent of violence. And that's the way that it was even looked at. They did a risk rating of me, and they said that I was a very, very high risk of causing extreme harm to refugees.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you mean? I'm not at risk of causing harm to anybody. And it was like, oh, it was your words. Like my words themselves. If I just abbreviated the word Pakistani, that could have caused extreme harm to a refugee hearing it. And that's where we've ended up. We've gone from sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. We need to be tolerant of everybody having a different point of view, tolerant of people expressing their view, to complete intolerance for any view that is different to the state's own. It's like you're not allowed to have your own opinion anymore. You're only allowed to have the state's opinion. If you have a differing opinion to the state, you have to be extremely careful in the way that you word it so that they don't throw you in jail for expressing it, which is effectively where it's gone. I think when the law came out, they said, well, what we're doing is we're trying to avoid violence to minorities, and people have to get worked up into a state before they will attack somebody. And we think that part of the working somebody up into a state before they attack somebody is the use of racial slurs and things like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to ban racial slurs and hopefully, or prosecute people that use them. And hopefully that will limit people getting so worked up that they go out and violently attack black people. And that was the logic. And we've gone from that, from the words themselves possibly inciting somebody to attack someone, to the words themselves doing the harm in themselves. Like the chance of a minority hearing those words is now the violence in itself. And if you're going to say that, it's almost like saying, well, you are legitimizing people using violence to prevent people from saying things they don't want to hear, because they're preventing somebody from inciting hate. You know, you're supposed to prevent a crime if you see it happening, and they could just say, well, I punched him in the face because I thought he was inciting hate by reciting crime statistics, for instance, or talking about a certain subject. And they could say, well, I was preventing him from offending, and then literally using violence to silence people. I think recently we had a case in America, and because somebody said a forbidden word after they had got stabbed, they said that the guy that stabbed him wasn't guilty.
I saw that. This is a couple of weeks back, isn't it? Yeah, he'd used a racial slur, according to their definitions of that, even though he'd received a knife wound, and therefore he was more culpable for creating harm than the guy that stuck a knife in him. Yeah,
exactly. So that's where it's ended up, and that was in America. But I mean, it's the same mentality in Britain. It's better in America, because what's illegal in America is inciting violence, inciting actual violence, not using old-fashioned American words or old-fashioned English words, but literally telling somebody to go out and physically attack somebody else. That's against the law, but it's not against the law to use old-fashioned English, which again is where it's ended up. Is if you use words that were quite common in use 20 years ago and were not seen as racial slurs back then, and you use them today, then you run the risk of it. And you know, this is factual. While I was in prison, I haven't watched television for many years, and I watched Shameless, Paul Abbott's TV series about a council estate, and I think that began in the 90s, and that was abbreviated the word Pakistani. It was loads of racial slurs in it. Some of it was far worse than the stuff that I was saying in court. But he was never prosecuted for that. And what's the difference between me and Paul Abbott? Apart from him being a TV scriptwriter, he's left wing. So if you're left wing, you're okay to use this language. If you're right wing and you're not a media personality, then we're going to prosecute you for it, which says that it's the political view that they are prosecuting you for, not the actual language. Yeah. And even in The Simpsons, they use this old scientific term for black people. They used that in The Simpsons from probably 25 years ago. And then we had, when Donald Trump was being inaugurated, the black pastor that he had, he used this word as well during Trump's inauguration. And all of these uses of those terms are okay. And again, it's because they're not nationalists that are actually using them. And also it shows you that these words were in common use 20 years ago. So you shouldn't really be shocked that somebody is still using these words today that grew up hearing these things. And they were saying, when I was talking to probation and the various people that are related to it, and they were saying, well, you know, it's the fear that terrorism could come from it. And I was like, well, look, if people that use these words are most likely to be terrorists, then your biggest terrorist population, your biggest terrorist demographic in Great Britain is going to be everybody over the age of 80. Because they're all going to remember using words far worse than I do.
Maniacs, those lot. Yeah, the octogenarians, watch out for those. They're lethal.
They use words, you know, they use words that are considered much stronger than the scientific term for a black person, just because that was the word that was used all the time. I mean, even the dog in the Dam Busters was called that. People used to call their pets by that name.
I know they were going to remake it, weren't they? They were going to remake the Dam Busters, and I think that I can't remember what the new name was. But it was obviously not the original name that he actually did call his dog. So, you know, there we go. And he used to be able to get shoes that were that colour.
Yeah.
They were referred to as that in the shop. My mum used to come and she worked in shoe shops. She said, oh, these are that colour. Of course, my mum would be locked up now, I suppose, but then she would be an octogenarian, so maybe she'd get away with it. Maybe there's a pass if you're over a certain age. I don't know. I mean, it's the weaponized. It's obviously part of. This is a really detailed thing that has personally come at your door, and you've gone through that. Do you see? I mean, I tend to see it as part of a wider picture of suppression of thought in all sorts of ways, and we know that this is not brand new. These sorts of controls of words have happened back in European history, particularly in the last 20th century, if we include Russia as part of Europe, with that Bolshevik revolution. They were demonizing and categorizing certain words and sentences then, because it's a great way, from their point of view, to get people to shut down in terms of thinking about things. And it's not the way we're all... I mean, it's bizarre the way that people are portrayed a nationalist. It's as if you wake up every morning And the first thing on your mind is, what can I generate some internal hate about today? It's the farthest thing usually from anybody's mind. We're just concerned generally about the plight and the opportunities for our own people, as you mentioned earlier, as any race or tribe should be worthy of the name. I want it. I wouldn't mind, if the Chinese can use all those words in China. They might well do. I think they've got a reputation, haven't they, for sort of letting rip verbally. You see these clips every now and again, which are very much in that thing. And we don't live in China. I don't want to go live there. But I'm just saying this control of words is a consistent ploy. Once you've demonized words, I mean, even this word, hate, which is the biggie. So there's been a big PR campaign on hate over the last, 10 years or so? Maybe it's longer than that. It's been building up. That hate is a bad thing. But it's it's to me, and maybe you'd be accused of just being pedantic about it. My dictionary says that hate is a strong aversion to or dislike of something, whatever the target of your hate is. A strong aversion to, i.e. you don't want to be around it, or you dislike it, an intense dislike of things. By that definition, I can't imagine that there's one person alive right now on the face of the earth that doesn't hate something. I make light of it, but I do hate beetroot, Sven. I don't like it, right? I have a strong aversion to the smell of it. It actually makes me feel unwell almost immediately. You say, well, this is being flippant. I'm not being flippant. I'm just trying to point out, where does it begin and where does it end with these definitions of words? So if people are not hating, to some degree, they're not alive, are they? Because isn't that part of your internal, permanent, 24/7 discrimination process? I choose this because this is in line with my aims and goals and gives me a sense of well-being, and it's peaceable. And I reject that because it causes me harm. I actually hate that over there. It really upsets me. But apparently you're not allowed to discriminate. It's all about this thing about discrimination. It's another crazy word. And tolerance. You've mentioned that. I can't remember who said it. Some woman back in America, I think in the 1930s or 40s, said something about tolerance is an appalling condition. The general gist of the quote was, it's a terrible condition because it's held by people that literally have no convictions or beliefs in anything. And I think it's true. I think, if you have got a condition of intolerance towards a thing, doesn't that imply, I think it actually proves, that you've got an internal value system that's important to you? That's how you make your decisions through life, don't you? You chose this group of people to grow up with and you rejected the other one because you couldn't tolerate their behaviour, or you couldn't tolerate the way they behave towards you. You just go, I'm not dealing with this. It's ridiculous. You don't cause a fight about it. You just go somewhere else. But, I'm getting slightly detailed with it. But they're running on that. Their operating system now in the sort of judicial arena has morphed over to this sort of movement of, what do we call it, the Overton window, which has been, so when you use the word extreme, what does that mean? Seriously, I mean, what do these words actually mean?
Just let me go back to this bit there with hate, this aversion to and this dislike of, and you say, well, I don't really dislike anything. I don't really have a strong aversion to any of that. But then they come out with the word hateful. To be hateful means to use insults, abuse, or threats. And that's what they use. So they say anything that it could be considered insulting, abusive, or threatening language, that's being hateful. Therefore, that is inciting hate. So that's the logic that they use. And the courts will say, well, what do you mean it's a very nebulous term, hate? We use the dictionary definition. There's the dictionary. It says insult, abuse, or threat. So was what you were saying, do a jury consider what you were saying there to be insulting, abusive, or threatening? That's what it boils down to. So because obviously you're going to think, well, hate, strong aversion to, strong dislike. I don't dislike these people. I'm concerned about my government's immigration policy. But because you might get quite upset at some of the things you're seeing in the news about some of these people and the effects of the government immigration policy, you might use a term that could be considered insulting when you're talking about grooming gangs, or when you're talking about young girls being sexually assaulted or raped by foreigners. You might use insulting term. Then that becomes you using a hateful term, and then that becomes you inciting hate. And just to bring up this other term that you were talking about there, discrimination. Again, they've made this into a negative word, but everything's about discrimination. When you're a child, you learn to discriminate between good and bad. You know, what's good to put in my mouth, what's bad to put in my mouth, what's going to poison me, what's going to nourish me. You discriminate between things, and that's the way that we learn is literally by discrimination.
Yes.
And the finer and more discriminating you are, you know, the more that you learn. The more you learn to differentiate between things that maybe they all look fairly similar, but there's actually slight differences to them. And the better you are at telling those slight differences, the more intelligent you are. You know, it's like when you know that more colors, it's a sign of being more intelligent. So the more that you can discriminate and the more that you work on that skill, the more you're going to improve yourself, basically. And yet we say, well, discrimination is wrong. That's a wrong thing. It's not. It's a life-saving thing that people have.
It's a quality thing as well. Do you remember that phrase? People would say that, oh, they're a person of excellent discriminating taste. I mean, it's a standard thing. There was that phrase, you know, like, oh, well, I choose this, and people would you trade on it in conversations, particularly when you're a teenager. You know, I remember, you know, you'd dismiss somebody's taste in music. I'm picking that one. It's always a hot topic, right? And they would dismiss yours, and you go, well, you got no taste. I mean, you know, that was just tasteless trash. My mum used to say, you know, with certain things, my mum would turn the telly off when Coronation Street came on because it was below the belt. She didn't like it, so it got turned off. And I grew up a healthier person for it, to be quite honest. Although they did sink into the mire later on after I'd left home. But I mean, it's just a normal thing. But it's so discrimination, extremism, hate. What else have they got in their grab bag? Tolerance. I mean, anything. All those words are connected with you, the individual, as it were, exercising choice, thinking. Those are processes that reflect your thinking to some degree, don't they? And you know, they're right in some regards that there are people out there that are volatile and highly reactive and can be stirred up. But that doesn't really apply here at all because there's like a pass to get in. You go, look, we're going to talk about this stuff. If it's not up your street, don't come in. Of course, they have to send their agents in because they think you're, you know, driving everybody to a crazy sort of whipped up condition, something that the English never ever do. I mean, it's very rare. We don't do that sort of thing. We sit down and have a cup of tea and can we just think this through and talk about it in a sensible fashion? We're quite happy to be patient, but they're seeking to cut even that process off. I think it's all part of this sort of imprisonment of the way that you think. It's all part of that process. That's what they're anxious about, because they've been nudging everything, let's call it, to the left for a long time. And so, you know, when you think about it's very, very strange, really, the whole thing. I mean, the Labour Party, for example, of the 1960s would probably be classed as extreme right-wing these days, wouldn't it? Considering the way everything's been shifting around. I don't know.
I think they might well be. Another interesting term there is extremism and extremist. I guess it's putting two words together, extreme and supremacist. Mm-hmm. But the government came out with their own definition of extremism a while back, and it was somebody that goes against British values. And when I was in prison, they had all these British values up on the wall in the college, and they were really quite good. You know, the rule of law, democracy, and you could tell where all of these values had actually came from in British history. And I thought, well, I could do a really good podcast series on these and how they've been completely subverted by the modern establishment, and how these terms have been completely subverted and twisted so that they're now the opposite of what they were originally intended to be. And then while I was thinking about doing that, the government then decided they were going to change the meaning of the word extremism again. And Michael Gove came out with this new official definition of extremism. And I was thinking, well, who is Michael Gove to tell us what the definition of the word
Indeed.
is?
Yes.
Surely the dictionary is the one that should do that. And Michael Gove came out with a new definition of extremism. And he was saying it's somebody that seeks to take away somebody else's rights. Right. Okay. So if somebody...
Like the government, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. So somebody's against abortion, like they're an extremist, are they? Because they want to see abortion being limited. So if you want to see anything being limited, then you're an extremist. So I thought, well, this is, you know, it is like the government, like members of the government might campaign to not have the abortion laws so easy as they actually are. I think we've got some of the easiest abortion laws in the whole of Europe. So somebody might be campaigning against that, but that would mean that they were then an extremist. And I thought, well, hang on a minute, isn't Michael Gove an extremist? Don't we have the right to be assumed innocent? And what he is saying, because he gave a list of various groups that he thought were extremist. None of them had anybody that had broken any laws. None of them in these groups had convictions for breaking the speech laws. And yet he was saying all these groups would be considered extremists. And I thought, well, you're taking away their right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. They haven't been proven guilty. They're not guilty of using hate speech. How can you then say that they're extremists? So I thought this is really wrong. And then I saw you have to see a psychologist in there. You have to do like a psychologist report. And the report that she was doing is a specific counter-extremism report. I forget the name of the initials. And the first thing I said is, right, well, what definition of extremism are we going to use then? And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, there are three, aren't there? She said, what do you mean by that? I said, well, there's this old one, British values. I said, Michael Gove has just given us a new one that we're all supposed to use. I said, and then you've got the dictionary definition, an extreme supremacist. And she said, well, we'll go with the dictionary definition. Forget all these other ones that the government have brought in. And I thought, well, that is actually quite sensible. So, the people that are actually involved in this can see how ridiculous some of the stuff that comes out from the government is. But to be told from on high what your definition of a word is supposed to be, I mean, that's really quite tyrannical, isn't it? It's not.
I think that's the right word. Yeah, I think tyranny is it, because we are not invited to communicate or be listened to. It's more like a theatre. It's a play that's taking place, and they're writing all the lines for you. I don't want to say these lines. Well, you can't say those. You can't say the ones that you actually want to say. We don't allow that. It's just this extension of their assumed power. I mean, it all comes from, I suppose part of it comes from the fact that where does their power derive from? They would say from the vote of the masses, I guess, is what they're going to say. But they don't behave well. And nearly all the things that you've just been going through, which they use as criticisms of us, I would suggest are equally, if not more so, applicable to them. Is our government not a globalist extremist? It is. They're applying extremist globalist policies to this nation against, broadly speaking, most of the consent that has never been asked for from the people. And it's the sheer ruck in the total absence of the communication process. I think they understand exactly how vexing's not the right word, but how disruptive and effective it is for knocking us off balance. We are British by received birth and inheritance and all these other things, but you're not allowed to talk about that because that's now going to be classed as you being a supremacist or something. I don't know what they do with Diana Ross and the Supremes. Have they ever convicted them? Mind you, they're not around now, are they?
It's on the list, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's on the list of extremist white supremacist things. Is somebody's concerned about immigration, concerned about demographics, starts talking about their heritage. All of these things are now on government lists as red flag warnings. I think I can remember seeing one about the army, particularly to deal with that. But just one thing you were saying there is, where do they get their power from? Mm-hmm. One of the reasons why they have this power, if you have people in power, and you do have to have hierarchies, there's hierarchies all the way throughout nature. But if you're going to have people with this power, there has to be something to bind them so that they don't abuse that power. And we always used to have people taking an oath, and they would swear by God to uphold the law and uphold their oath. And what we've done over the last 100 years is destroy any faith in God anymore. So these vows that they now take are completely hollow. Years before, when somebody vowed not to do something and they took a vow to God, they swore to God, they certainly weren't going to break that, because they thought they would get eternal damnation if they did. And they really believed this stuff. And now we no longer have that. We no longer have a belief in God. And yet the whole of the hierarchy of our system is built upon having the fear of God. If you don't have the fear of God in you and you put somebody in power, then they're going to abuse that power, aren't they? And one of the ways that I think you can see the symptoms of this is...
That's a brilliant point. It's a brilliant point, that. It's absolutely key. It's key. That phrase from Scripture, fear God. And I've spoken to people about this over the years. And of course, when I was younger, maybe 20 years or so ago, I'd think, you don't really need to. It doesn't mean being scared of God. Well, I think it means respectful. You do need to, because who else is it going to be? I mean, they want it to be them, don't they? They want it to be them. They want us to basically relate to them as if they were gods with supreme power. And of course, they're doing everything that they can to attain it. Nibble, nibble, nudge, nudge. You can't say this. You can't think that. You can't do that. And if they do not have a fear of God, you're dealing with unaccountable people. And it's really God's law that we're talking about, which is the law that applies to all of us. Just as you were saying there about natural hierarchies in nature, they do occur. People are, certain people are more skilled and able and have a greater aptitude in certain fields of behavior, study, whatever you want to call it. And it's a great gift, but not if that structure's abused, which, of course, I think we'd probably suggest is really being abused heavily right now. It's being, mullered by these types.
Well, they are. I think they are trying to take the place of God. And I've seen like all these closed circuit cameras. People used to individually have the fear of God, so they wouldn't break the law. They wouldn't go against what they were taught in the Bible, and they would do that because they thought that they were always being watched by God, always being watched by, their conscience. So they wouldn't break it. People don't have that anymore, and we now have these cameras everywhere, literally everywhere. Cameras watching everyone to make sure that they do as they're told. Whereas before, you didn't need anything like that. Okay, you could say, well, we didn't have that technology back then, but we didn't need that. Everybody just assumed that they would be judged on their behaviour. Now you've got the government saying, well, we're going to judge you on your behaviour. We're going to watch everything that you do. Now saying you're going to have this digital ID so that we can watch everything that you do online, everything that you say. I mean, there is an argument that what you put online is the same as what you talk about on a phone conversation. You can't prosecute the British Telecom for somebody having a conversation. You can't prosecute them for just because drug dealers are using the phone, say. You can't then prosecute the phone company. So what are they doing? Trying to prosecute internet companies that allow people to say what they want on social media and telling them that they have to alter what people are saying or prevent people from seeing it. And back 10 years ago, I mean, that was the argument, that these social media companies should be seen as utilities, just like the other utilities that we have. And there shouldn't be any government interference into them. But it's gone in that other direction, unfortunately. But there was a time when it did look like the internet was going to go more in a freed up direction. And it was seen as being extremely democratic. One of the most democratic things being that you could put your content out there and you wouldn't be throttled, and you'd have just as much chance of it being seen by many people as some of these big companies. And when you would type into a search engine what you're looking for, you got the most popular results. It was absolutely democratic. There was no censorship. You saw what was the most popular results. And then after Donald Trump being elected in 2017, they did away with all of that, and they literally broke all the search engines, and they stopped putting the most popular results at the top, and they started putting the results that they wanted you to see. And then for a while, the only one that you could use that worked was Yandex. And I think they do the same with Yandex now as well, the Russian one. But there's been big changes over the last 10 years anyway.
I mean, I think there's a parallel as well, although the technology is obviously more primitive, although it's still very effective, to do with newspapers and the arrival of the mainstream mass media press in the 1800s onwards. You had a situation where when local papers first started up, by groups of businessmen getting together and doing things, the journalism was freer, it was more lively, and you can certainly say that was the case with the internet sort of 25 years ago, particularly sort of immediately after 9/11. From about 2000 to 2010, there was a lot of lively stuff, and you had to pick and choose your way through things, and you would come across offensive material. You're bound to, really, whatever your taste, where you go, I don't like that. But that's called, don't you just click another link? I mean, it's this ability to choose your own outcomes that they don't like. Because generally, I think to some degree, if we're left to our own devices, nobody is voluntarily going to choose what's given to us by government. Because it's poor. It's just really poor. It's 10th rate nonsense that they come up with, because they're all sort of obedient to a system which they have been effectively sucked into. I understand where they're coming from. It's just what they don't get is that we don't need them. And really, youth exercising your own discrimination and choice and your own thinking runs counter to what they want. And you can see it's just like a line. There's always been this talk about, it will never get that bad. Well, it has. And some of us knew it was going to get this bad. And if you sort of study history, which is why it's valuable, you see whenever you get these sort of concentrations of power, tyranny is generally, it's not so much that it never was there, it just becomes more overt. You see it, and they get carried away because they can't go back somehow. They can't. They never take the wisdom tablets when they were young anyway. They just took the clever tablets, and the clever tablets don't work. They don't. They're only short-term stuff, and it makes for a very difficult situation here in these islands. I think it's very not British. We just want to put the kettle on and think it through. And can we just talk calmly about this, right? And in calm talk and in steady talk, the truth can come out. In a way, they don't even want that. That's why people are painted as extremists. They've got to paint you as some sort of, a whisker away from becoming a maniac. And it's not true, is what I would say quite clearly. It's not my experience anyway. Most people I meet don't want trouble, but they have got concerns. And this is a way of making sure that those concerns are not heard. They're not given a voice. They've got many ways of doing that, of course, but that's definitely what's going on, all that kind of stuff. It's. I
do think an improvement is with Elon Musk taking over Twitter. Nobody would have thought that would have happened a couple of years back.
No.
It was so left wing. As I say, after Trump was elected in 2017, they had a massive clampdown all the way across the internet because it was fairly democratic. And if it's democratic and people can say what they want to say and people can go to the most popular voices will be populist and they will be nationalist. And that's what they couldn't handle. So they literally got rid of millions of accounts on YouTube and Twitter. And then we had all this massive censorship that was on Twitter really coming to a head with COVID. When it suddenly became clear that this wasn't about preventing violence to minorities, because the same organizations that were reporting people for using old-fashioned English were now reporting people for talking about things to do with COVID, coming out with alternative scientific information about COVID that was counter to the government's narrative. And it was these same anti-hate organizations that started doing that. So to me, it was like, well, the mask has really come off there, isn't it? Because clearly hate speech is about saying what the government don't want you to say. It's not about protecting minorities. How is it about protecting minorities to stop people from talking about vaccinations or talking about COVID? That's not protecting minorities. That's protecting the government narrative. That's what all this is about. And I think a lot of the people that were protesting against that COVID narrative, I think they could see that. And then over the last few years since COVID, more and more of them have come over to nationalism. And say you've got Elon Musk has purchased Twitter and he's reinstated a lot of accounts. He hasn't reinstated all of them, but he has instated a lot of them. And a lot of these conversations are going on there and they are popular. Twitter is extremely popular. Telegram is as well. Telegram is extremely popular because, again, Telegram is very democratic. It has a light touch approach. You're not likely to get banned from Telegram. And again, they wouldn't let me use Telegram. And I was saying, look, it's a communication device. It's so that I can communicate with people. And you can, if you want to have a look at it, you can see my messages. You can see what I've been writing. And no, they just wouldn't have it. They just wouldn't let me on there, even though it would have been very easy for probation to have checked what my communications were if they had let me use Telegram. They just did not want me to be conversing with other nationalists. It's like the state just wants to cut everybody off from being able to talk to other people about the subjects which are important to them, because they know that they're on shaky foundations with all of this stuff, really shaky foundations. That's why they have to silence it. That's why they have to come up with this crazy idea that you have to stop people speaking about these things because they will use violence. Well, surely if you stop somebody from speaking, prevent them from speaking, their only option is to use body language. If you put a gag across their mouth, the only option is to use their fists to try and get your attention, which is effectively what's happening. Whereas whenever an atrocity happens, the first thing they do is say, oh, well, we have to shut down all the hate speech. Like this atrocity that's happened in Australia. And they asked the governor what he was going to do about the problem with radical Islam. And he said, well, we've banned the Nazi salute. As if people doing the Nazi salute had anything to do with an attack on Jews by Islamist radicals.
Oh, people do the Nazi salute up and down the coast here all day long. There's an absolute... I mean, I'm joking, right? It's absolute, people are just going around doing that salute. I mean, it's just mad. The whole thing's mad. It's like a
There's nothing to
theatrical
do with it,
loony
is it?
bin to even project
There's
that
nothing to
people
do
are
with
doing that. They're in a sort of geriatric condition. But look, we've come to the end of the first hour. I'd like to take a little break here. We can call it a toilet break. We can call it whatever. I played this a few times before, but it's very apt, the lyrics. This is Van Morrison, and we always get Van Morrison's a great guy. I always let everybody know that there's kind of copyright free is Van Morrison's material. I think he must be so talented and so wealthy, and he's such a good egg. And he did this great album. This is really relevant. You've heard it a few times before, but I'm going to put it. This is They Own the Media, so it's just really about speech and thought control. We're going to play a bit of Van Morrison, and I'll be back here for hour 2 with Sven Longshanks. Stay tuned.
They tell us that ignorance is bliss. I guess for those that control the media it is. They own the media, they control the stories we are told. If you ever try to go against them, you will be ignored, 'cause they control. They control the narrative, they perpetuate the myth. Keep on telling you lies, tell you ignorance is bliss. Believe it all and you'll never get wise to the truth, 'cause they control everything you do. Everything you do, everything you do, everything you do. Perpetuate the myth. Keep on selling you lies, tell you ignorance is bliss. Believe it all and you never get the truth. Never get wise to their lies, to their lies. They control the media, they control the media, they control the media, they control the media.
On the Media there by Van Morrison. They sure jolly well do. Speaking of the media, just to pick up on the comment you were making just before the break there, Sven, I've got to tell you, I do have certain sort of question marks around Mr. Musk. I can't make him out, to be quite honest. I don't know what part he plays in the great stage play, the theatre of the whole thing. I mean, it's definitely improved, but there's stuff on there now on Twitter which kind of puts what you said way down the list. I mean, I don't know if you've been, I mean, you obviously gone there, right? I see a lot of stuff flying through there that's extremely direct and hostile to certain groups. There's no two ways about it. And it's allowed to sit there. And I then put my paranoid Paul hat on and I go, is this a big collection project? So what they're seeking to do is identify good communicators, or let's say fluid ones that can write and think things through, and the followings that they get, and they're kind of been earmarked for future sort of herding into some kind of another censorship pen. I mean, maybe I'm just overly paranoid and you should accept it for what it is. But I think no matter what is going on out there, everybody should be on their guard all the time with how they communicate and do things. And although that sounds limiting, and it is to some degree, I also think that it gives us an opportunity to find different ways to skin this communication cat. There's more than one way of doing it. And I think people over here anyway, it seems to me that I don't know what it's been like for you whenever you've talked about things, the meaty topics, right? The big stuff that's sort of like context shifting. I get so little traction with people generally on that stuff because it's such a shock, I think, to the system to introduce to people ideas about history or recent events from a completely different perspective to the one that they've been unfortunately absorbing, courtesy of the mainstream media, most of their life. You don't get very far with them. But if there's, I'm thinking, well, maybe a nudge process is what's required. The other part of my brain's going, yeah, but have we got enough time? But then we've got whatever time we've got. I think you just try and do the best that you can each day and try and find as effective a means of communicating certain ideas without unnecessarily distressing people. I don't want people to be in distress because they can't hear what you're saying when it happens. But it's, that's just my experience. I know years ago, I've mentioned this before, maybe you've had a similar thing. You sort of bump into a big block of knowledge that prior to then you weren't aware of. And there are still moments like that going on. I expect it to go on really until I leave here. And you get enthused by it. You go, good grief, do you know this? And there are certain people you can speak to about that, and it's a great joy to be able to do it. But most people that you would know in most standard walks of life, they don't have an in on the conversation. They don't even, I've said this before, they don't really even know, a lot of people don't even know that these topics even exist. And that if you even go near them, you're obviously a maniac for even asking questions about those things. I don't know what your experience is like. I would imagine, I'm just sort of projecting a bit here, that since you've attained your freedom again and you're back communicating again, you probably had a lot of time there to think about how you approach your communication in terms of the current situation, whether we like it or not, we shouldn't have to, but we do, don't we? It seems to me.
Yeah, well, I had plenty of time to think about it. I mean, for the whole time when I was on license, for a couple of hours a week, this chap would come to talk to me, and he was franchised out to the civil service. I forget what the organisation was called, something like Desist and Disengage, and it's another organisation separate to Prevent, sort of higher than Prevent. Prevent's really, I think, for youngsters, and they have this other organisation, Desist and Disengage. And this fellow would come to talk to me. When he first came to see me, he said, right, what we're going to do is we'll go through some of your content, and then we'll have a look at your sources and the source material that you used, and then I'll show you some of my studies and the source material that I've got, and we'll see where we get with it. And he soon realised that my views were very different to what they were when I put the content out back in 2017. I mean, it's like 8 years ago. So
yeah. My
views have evolved since then. And he could see that I certainly wasn't expressing myself in a way that could be considered insightful in any way. So we would end up talking about geopolitics and all the other stuff that's going on, basically. I used to really enjoy my conversations with him, and it would help to keep me intellectually sharp, that I could have these conversations once a week. Yeah. And also, practice using the sort of language that I should be using on the radio. They don't want me to go back to jail. They want me to use language which isn't going to get me into trouble. They knew they weren't going to change my views on things, but they just wanted to make certain that I had seen all this other information that was out there as well. And I knew most of the information that he was showing me. Some of it I didn't. As I say, he was good at what he did, and I think he'd probably be quite successful at turning people away from a violent, who were heading off in a violent direction. But I wasn't heading off in a violent direction anyway. No. So I did have a chance to sort of practice basically for the year and a half I practiced for a couple of hours a week. And he would say, like, what do you think of these conversations? And I said, well, I think they would have made excellent podcasts if I'd recorded it. They would have made really, really good podcasts. We had some really good debates. He knew what he was talking about, so it was good for me to debate with him.
That sounds rich. That sounds like a pretty rich experience considering your circumstances.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
it was definitely. Yeah, it's definitely helped me out, and I enjoyed talking to him. So that helped. But when I was actually in prison itself, you got a lot of people in there that come from sort of different worlds. A lot of them are on drugs. A lot of them are just caught up in the sort of insulated world that they're in, and they don't really know that much of what's going on outside of it because they've got so many important things that are happening to them with their day-to-day living. Just surviving daily can be difficult for some of them. So being concerned about what's happening outside with things like Drag Queen Story Hour is like out of their field of sort of knowledge. But when I would tell them about it, they would absolutely be shocked. A lot of them just didn't believe that was possible. And I was like, no, that is possible. There are drag queens in libraries reading storybooks to toddlers. And they understood it straight away. They were like, but they're adult entertainers. Yes, they have adult entertainers, homosexual adult entertainers, lewd adult entertainers reading to children. And they're like, well, what's the point of that? And I'm like, to sort of desensitize them to it, I guess, make them feel welcome. They were absolutely shocked and stunned and supportive of me for speaking out against it. But what it really sort of illustrates is how we follow the news and we follow the politics and we follow what's going on. But a large proportion of society just doesn't know what's going on out there. If they did know, they would be really shocked, as the people in prison were. I mean, there's one guy, he was quite a black guy, and he was used to being gangs, and he was quite anti-racist, and thought, well, I might have some trouble here. But as soon as he heard that I was involved with people that were protesting against Drag Queen Story Hour, and we didn't want this LGBTQ propaganda to children, he was like, let me shake you by the hand. And he was like really friendly to me after that, as soon as he knew that. So, even people that you could guess were over on the other side of politics, people that were sort of Labour supporters as well, they were totally against all the immigration, totally against it. Couldn't understand why it was going on and why Labour were doing it. And people that had, their parents had voted Labour and their grandparents had voted Labour and they will always vote Labour, and they don't understand why Labour aren't doing anything about this, all this immigration, if they're supposed to be the party of the worker. So
if they're, I think the operative word there is supposed to be, because all of the parties, all of them have been overthrown by something else. They're obedient to something else. Conspiracy theory. No, really, conspiracy fact, actually, or conspiracy analysis. I mean, by their fruits shall ye know them. None of them behave as if they really care about their actual real job, which is, as it's put on the tin. I mean, they fail in every regard. If they're supposed to be the best stewards of the interests of the nation for their, whilst they're in power, do they do that? Well, they don't. They don't. The news is basically a saturation point for worldwide dramas, which we must conform to. There's hardly anything about what's really happening in our nation unless it's dramatic, violent, terrible, and they can use it as another sort of, talking point to keep extending the conditioning that, we're all going to come together and it's all going to work out great. And we're looking at this going, but it isn't working out great. And in history, for those of us that looked, it never, ever has, because nature, the laws of nature, move against that. Why can't we work in line with the laws of nature and we can get on peaceably with everybody without you having to put our own people in such a state of distress? But you can't even say that, they're not in distress. Yeah, they are. They are. People are in a state of distress. And of course, the digital medium stuff, all of it is this great distraction, this sort of drug that smartphones have become to some degree, and the sort of permanent sort of issuing of drama, and Donald Trump's going to save us. No, Nigel Farage is going to save us. No, they're not. They can't. I was watching an interesting little video the other day with Dominic Cummings. Are you familiar with him? Do you know of him at all? Heard of
Yes,
him?
is this something you said about them going after Nigel Farage?
Yeah, that's right. He was a sort of, I think he was a sort of political fixer with inside the Conservative Party. Was it the Conservative Party? I think it was. He used to be a nightclub bouncer, so he didn't look as though he was, but apparently he was. So he knows how to handle people and disputatious moments, I suppose. And there was an interview with him recently on, I think it was, actually Michael Gove was on it, so you probably don't want to watch it. I mean, I'm not a fan either, by the way, but Gove was on there, and I think it was it the Telegraph or something like that? And he was talking about focus groups that he'd conducted recently, and he was talking about his history of setting up focus groups. So I'm sure everybody knows, but just to go over the basics, where they pull in a sort of cross-section of the British public, fire a series of questions at them and look at their responses to see where their thinking is at, what it is that's the drivers and what they possibly need to appeal to in the electorate, to get in next time when the election comes around. Makes sense, if you don't know, if you're wrapped up in Westminster, if you're in that sort of complete bubble, they don't really know what's going on. Most of them, I think, outside on the street for real people. So this is how they find out, through a process. And what he was saying was, he said, when we asked people about the Conservative Party, say 5 or 6 years ago, there was a lot of response, most of it negative, but they were engaged. They were engaged with offering criticisms. In other words, they were communicating from a point of view that their view, if listened to, would affect it, and they wanted it to be affected in a positive way. They were engaged with the future of the party. He said, we just did one about 2 months ago, and basically the response from the audience was one of complete indifference, as if the Conservative Party doesn't even exist. And, of course, I would imagine newspapers would laugh at that, but you never know where these things might go. The Whigs disappeared almost overnight when they were out of kilter with everything. So he believes it's shot. Most of them are going to sort of run over to reform because they need a job, don't they? It's sad. It's sad. And he also said, and I think this is just a telling point in terms of the pragmatics of politics, he said, people think that Farage can fix it. And he can't. No one individual can do it, he said. And he's not a team builder at the moment, which he's not. And they don't understand. People don't. This is a team process. So, we've currently got that genius at the helm at the moment, Sir Keir Starmer. But his team are they're not much better. I mean, what are you supposed to do? I don't look to politics for a solution anyway. I mean, it's not my thing, but you have to give it some attention, don't you, to see just what kind of maniac's going to get behind the levers of power for the next 5 years or whatever. We've got the worst prime minister, I think, ever. Although I think Churchill runs him close, but that wouldn't go down well in certain quarters. But that's my view,
I like Rupert Lowe. I think he's very, very good. But
I'm with you. Yep.
They kicked him out of reform. The guy's brilliant. Everything I see him say on Twitter, I'm like, yes, that's excellent. That's exactly what I want to hear politicians saying. But I think he's saying he's going to retire. You're saying there isn't a political solution. I mean, the way that I see things, they have to have this immigration because of the economy that we have, because we have an economy that's based upon usury, and it has to keep inflating. That there has to be more and more money in circulation, just so that people can pay back the interest on the debt. And the more people they have, the more money there will be in the system, because money can only be created in the system by somebody borrowing it. The bank doesn't actually create it, but when somebody says, I want to borrow X amount of money, the bank puts that on the sheet, it gives them the notes, or it gives them the checks, and the notes say, I promise to pay the bearer because that person has taken out a loan. Now, whether that is the government taking out a loan to pay benefits in the form of bonds, or whether that is an individual taking out a loan so that they can start up a business, that's the only way that money can be put into the supply. So it doesn't really matter if it's a foreigner that comes here and goes straight on benefits, or it's a foreigner that comes here and works in a business. It's all the same. It has to keep inflating. Yep. At the moment, I think it's 3 times our gross domestic product is the debt. So they only pay the interest on it. But even just paying the interest on it, it just has to keep expanding. So if you got somebody into the government who said, right, well, now we're going to stop all this immigration, the first thing that would happen is the same thing that happened to Liz Truss. They would say, the market's got spooked and mortgages have gone up and people's pensions have gone down because the markets are all spooked because the immigration is going to stop. If the immigration stops, the money supply is going to shrink. So all the mortgages, you're going to have to pay more for your mortgage. you're going to get less from your pension. And straight away, the whole great British public would be saying, get that person out of office, get that person out of office. And that's the problem that we're in. And unless you were to change the whole banking system and remove usury from it,
oh, yes,
I don't
please.
really see what else you can do. This is the end result of it. That's why it says in the Bible, thou shalt not lend upon usury to thy brother. And it's considered a mortal sin right the way through the Bible. The old Germanic tribes, they never used usury. Alfred the Great, he never used usury. It wasn't until the Jews actually came into Britain with William the Conqueror that they started using usury, and then the king started making money from that. Edward Longshanks was a very good king. Instead of making money from it, he removed the Jews, because every time these Jewish moneylenders would die, all their money, because it was seen as ill-gotten gains, it would go to the crown. They couldn't leave it in a will to their descendants. You see, the Jews said, well, we've got a legitimate grievance there. We weren't allowed to leave our money to our descendants. And the king would take that money. So up until Edward I, every one of these kings was making all that money from these moneylenders. And Edward Longshanks, I'm not going to make that money from the moneylenders. It's wrong that you are lending upon usury to my people, and they're all poor and they owe literally everything. So he removed the Jews from the country. And then you get up to the time of William Cromwell, and the Jews are in Holland, which is where they went to, and they started helping Oliver Cromwell out with the funding for his new model army.
Didn't they?
He tried to get and he tried to get the Jews back in, but the people voted against it. And then they brought in King William of Orange, King Billy of Orange, the Dutch king. And once he came in, the Jews came back into England, and he gave them the tender to the Bank of England. And then they started doing the fractional reserve lending. And plus, at the same time, I think about the 13th century, 14th century, the Pope changed his views on usury. And instead of usury being any interest whatsoever, it became biting interest. So
well, Calvinism's got something to do with that, hasn't it? Because Calvin said it's okay for, and it's just not. It's fundamentally, any presence of it at all guarantees, we don't know how long it takes, but it guarantees the destruction of the civilization that uses it. And we're in that destructive period right now. It's literally a virus that runs through every commercial exchange. Therefore, you could say every exchange of human energy is actually being chewed into. I mean, I was looking up that term, the VIG that the mob use, vigorish, which is to do with payments of bets and things. But really, the whole system is a protection racket. And what you were just saying there, you said so much there. Like, let's just go back to Rupert Lowe a few minutes ago. So I take all of these people with a certain pinch of salt, but I use less salt when I'm thinking about him. He said a lot of good stuff, and I think the best decision he's made, I don't believe there's a political solution either. I've held that view most of my life, simply because I view the banks, until the bank is sorted out, you can forget all the other stuff. It's window dressing. It's just a great dramathon. It's never going to stop. But he's formed effectively a communications project, hasn't he? Like a pressure group. Restore, is that what it's called? I think it's called Restore. A word I like. I'm not into revolution. That's silly, right? Even though we were talking about revolutions on Thursday, just gone. What's the definition of a revolution? It's a thing that goes around once and you end up back in the same place, but just with a different bunch of people in charge who make it even worse. That tends to what happened. But I think Lowe has said some really good stuff. And I know people get exasperated with every single one of them. None of them are perfect from your own particular sort of viewpoint. You'll say, well, he's missed this out or he's not addressed that. It's about traction and momentum. If he's able to build a team around him, then he can do it. I mean, I think one of the reasons why Farage kicked him out is that basically when Lowe was in the room, Farage was not the number one guy experientially. Lowe was, because he's actually got more standing and bearing and he thinks clearer. I think Farage would be great to go out for with a pint. You go out for a pint with him, but if he gets in charge, and it's already been organised already, I would imagine. I'm not expecting anything because he's a city lad. And they can't change usury because they can't even think the way that you've just expressed it, which I agree 100% with everything you said, by the way. They can't change it because they're not thinking like that. They can't see the wood for the trees. Having all the trees is all that they're bothered about. It's just, so all the arguments that they put forth, they're mad. And Liz Truss, I've got a great clip for Liz Truss, right? Yeah, I'm going to play it. Let me just dig this up. It won't take a second. This is Liz Truss. You remember Steve Bannon? I've played this a few times, but it's definitely worth playing. Yeah. You remember Steve Bannon, who was the running mate with Trump? She was on his radio show back in, I think it was January 2024. So, yeah, 2 years ago now. And this is what she said. It's only a minute. Here we go.
What I found out when I got into number 10 is I thought that if I got to the top of the tree, I would be able to implement those conservative policies.
So you think once you're prime minister, as a little girl, I was thinking, if I get prime minister, I'll be like Churchill, change the country.
Exactly.
That's not how it works.
Exactly. And what I discovered was that I was not holding the levers. The levers were held by the Bank of England, by the Office of Budget Responsibility. They weren't held by the Prime Minister or the Chancellor. And I think that's a massive, that's a massive problem.
Hang on. You're saying the central bank, the Bank of England, is one of the things that controls. Are you a conspiracy theory person? You almost sound like Worm. You're MAGA.
What I'm saying, Steve, is that if the Bank of England governor can't be sacked and the Prime Minister can be sacked, then the Bank of England governor is going to have more power than the Prime Minister. And
seriously, I've said this before. That's the most truthful thing I've ever heard out of anybody that's close to the top in power. She was only there for, 47 days. And she did an interview as well recently, a couple of months ago, with somebody from, I don't know, was The Economist or something like that. And she brings all this up. It's about 15 minutes long. It's an excellent interview. It's really good. And she goes into it again. And she talks about Andrew Bailey, who's the current governor of the Bank of England. And what she's saying, and it comes back to the migration thing you were talking about as well. She said they're all globalists, all of them. And they're doing this to basically keep the economy ticking over and retaining the power of the bank. It's a power that they shouldn't have because it's based on usury. There's only one power they've got, which is usury. And if that is removed out of the system, it'll collapse. Now, we've also got a problem. You can't just go ahead and do that either, I think, even though I would love to. But I think it might be mad because it's as if civilization is like a drug addict. We've all been turned into monetary drug addicts. And it fits. The model fits. You need more of that money next year to get the same amount, the same hit this year. It's the same with drug addicts. They need more and more of it to get the same high. And it's designed to do that. So we've got all this meaningless activity, which is reported in economics. But the bottom line is that the engineering of the system is bound to produce this fault because it's got usury in it. And until it comes out, we're just spinning our wheels. I got some figures through from the States. You know, they're, what's the US debt? 37 trillion or something dollars. Their interest repayments alone each year are $1 trillion. What? It's $1 trillion. I mean, I don't know what their GDP is, but that's quite a bit of money, isn't it? You know, so it's a key. It's a key factor.
Who are they in debt to? It's like, don't they have all this wealth? Well, because the system is based on usury and it's based on debt. When you look around you, that's not wealth, that's not value, that's all mortgaged, that's all collateral on loans.
Yes.
That's why they owe trillions of dollars. Instead, what they've actually got is they've got trillions of dollars of value, which the American people has created and the American state and the American corporations has created. But instead of saying, well, this is all our value, it's all debt. It's all collateral on debt. That's the fundamental error that causes all of these other problems within the system, isn't it? I mean, that's what it is. Yeah. But once the genie's out of the bottle, it's very hard to get the genie back in the bottle again. And that's the system that we have. And we have to find a way to function within that system. So, which is why I always say, if you've got politicians that are going to make life slightly better for us, then support those politicians. They're not going to be able to turn everything around because they're not going to be able to change the whole economic system, the whole direction that we've been going for the last 800 years. They're just not going to be able to do that. But you might get some that will talk about these issues, might make life a bit better for white people, might stop some of the immigration, might stop some of these diversity, inclusion and equity policies like they're doing in America. I mean, I was talking to Mark Collette the other day who said, like, Trump has done more for Britain really than America just by talking about these issues, just by addressing the heads of state in Europe and saying, immigration is going to destroy you. It's going to destroy Western civilization. And the threat within Europe doesn't come from Russia. It comes from within. It comes from the people seeking to subvert democracy.
No, Sven, it's the Russians. It says so in the newspaper. It's the Russians, mate. Come on. He's just evil. I mean, it's a joke. This is like a rerun of World War II. It's just, oh, you're going to be the bad guy, Vladimir. Am I? Yeah. You'll be playing the role of the bad guy for the next 10 years or so. We're just going to make you out to be the most evil person in the world. And although it's a complete lie, after about 4 or 5 years, most people will believe it because they've just had their minds pummeled with this stuff. It is a diseased state that we live in. It really is. But you're right. We're looking for relief every now and again. Even if it's only from the symptoms, but the root cause is definitely I mean, there's two sort of components. Somebody put a comment, I think it was Warren actually. He talked about registration, childbirth, and usury. And those are the two. We're effectively enslaved by this. I mean, I think if you actually, the normal response to all the countries being in debt, like all of them are, question, if they're all in debt, who are they in debt to? Oh, the banking system. Oh, all right. Okay. So that's the thing. There's some bloke who's got his hand out saying, you all owe me trillions, And this, through a whole sort of labyrinthine web of control and influence, it's all held in place because all the people in that web, they get paid handsomely for maintaining it. So they're not going to change their behavior. That's not going to happen. But the actual truth, I believe, or something closer to the truth, is that all that money, say that 37 trillion that supposedly the American government, if it is one, owes, it actually owes it to the people of America. Same here. Because it's by your birth certificates that they've raised these collaterals, these monies, these mortgages on the value of your life by, viewing you as a commodity, literally a good, a tax cow in their system. And that's why it's a protection racket. They say, well, we're going to protect you from Vladimir Putin. We're going, if you were here, we wouldn't be in a conflict with Vladimir Putin, which you're creating about our ears every day, to justify your position that you're going to save us. It's not healthy. It's not healthy. How do you describe it? I mean, it's lunacy of a sort. It's controlled, clever dick, intelligent lunacy, but it's obviously not for our benefit, is it? Really, it's not really for the benefit of us pleasant peasants. It's not really for us. We're not included in it. They have to keep their game going. But, the usury stuff, absolutely, it's there. And I quite like Liz Truss. I'm probably turning into a fanboy purely because she said that. She said some more things. And when she was talking to this guy from the Express or wherever it was, she said to him, okay, so we got a banking system. Who should be in charge of it? And he says, well, he said, the Bank of England have got all these experts and, I trust them more than the government. So the experts. And she said, you're a globalist then. What's the point of having a democracy to vote people in? I mean, the point that they would make is, well, politicians don't understand banking. No, they don't. Why? Why don't they understand it? Particularly when they're up there making promises about how they're going to improve the economy. They don't even know how it works. This is mad. It's madness.
It's deliberately obfuscated, isn't it? The way that money is created. Everybody thinks that you put your savings in the bank and then it's the savings that the bank then lends out and pays you back an income on those savings. That's not how it works at all. It's illegal for the bank to put anybody's savings in jeopardy, to lend anybody's savings. Those savings have to stay there. The money is literally created by people taking out a loan. So if you say you've got no money in circulation whatsoever, and somebody says, right, well, I want to borrow £10 for my business. So the bank says, right, we will monetize that £10. You've now got £10 that can go in circulation, and all we want on that is 10% interest. So we just want £11. So the guy only got £10 in circulation. He can't then pay back that £11 because that extra pound in interest, the usury, that's not there in circulation. The only way that can get into circulation is if another person comes along, takes out another debt for £10, another £10 gets monetized, then you've got £20 in circulation. So you've got the first £10 principal that the first person borrowed, you've got the £1 interest that he has to pay back, but then the second person who's got to pay back £10 principal and £1 interest has then only got £9 to pay back.
Yeah,
that's how it starts. You're continually running on the hamster wheel, and you can never actually pay it off if you look at it as a whole. That's the way that the system works. That's the way that banking works, and it's not that complicated like that, is it?
It's not. That's absolutely. And if you just think of the trillions of exchanges that have taken place over the hundreds and hundreds of 500 or 600 years, but particularly since 1694, right? What we're seeing is like a build-up. It's a cancer, literally, in the system. It's a replication of false purchasing power. That's what it is. You know that there's a very simple. I say this. I shouldn't say this, but there is. At least when I say it, it sounds simple. I'm sure getting it in practice, but there is a little step that could be taken in the loan process, which would create a step down in terms of the power of the banks, but they could still carry on, and it would take this heat out of the system. And what you do, just going back to the example you gave about the tenner, what the bank does, it does something just very different, slightly different. Instead of creating £10, it creates 11. That's all it does. It says, we're going to charge 10% because it creates this stuff out of thin air, right? So it goes, we're going to put £11 into the system, and you're going to get the 10, and the pound, we're getting it today when we issue you the loan. We're done, right? We've got our pound. And you still have to pay 11 quid back, but the difference is that pound now exists for Bob Smith to go into the marketplace and acquire. He can get it. It actually exists. He's not reliant on Tom to go and borrow some money and swell it. In other words, it's not a self-perpetuating loan disease. It's like a replicating disease. And that's what it is. That's part of the whole process of it. And that's just a simple engineering thing. And I've said this before. If you put engineers, literally engineers in charge of the banking system, they would sort it out. They'd all get killed, of course, along the way. This is a bit of a problem, because the guys that know how it works would see exactly what's coming up. It's why they go berserk when you go anywhere near their banking system, because that is their power. That is the ring of power. You know, that is Mordor. It is the gloom in the world. It is the darkness that spreads everywhere. It comes from this. And, you know, it's such a dry subject as well to most people, because when you bring money up, people fall asleep. I don't blame them. It's a painful topic. You go, it's what's my life? Too many bills and not enough money. Yeah. But this is why it's an engineering issue. And we've had some brilliant guys, particularly from these shores, come up with solutions that just bloody work. And they're engineers. There's C.H. Douglas, you know, Clive, what's his name? I can't remember his name. Is it Clive? C.H. Douglas came up with a thing called social credit. Okay, so the word worry, I understand that. But he was an engineer. He built railway systems in South America. And they put him in charge of the MOD got hold of him in 1917. They said, we've got a problem producing planes. He said, why? He said, we don't know. Will you look into it? So he goes all over England. They're making engines here, wings there, fuselages there. The warehouses are full of all this stuff, but nothing's moving. And it turned out there was no purchasing power to move it around. He said, this is mad. We've actually made this stuff. We've got the wealth there, and it can't be applied. So he studied all this, and he came up with a similar sort of principle. If you supply the actual purchasing power, and going back to that example I just said, if you put the pound in at the point of the loan, you take this madness, you begin to take the heat out of the system. It's one step. You know, we want to go the whole hog, but the fact is we've got a lot of money addicts. I'm one. Not by choice, but because it's the system that we live in. We've been born into it. And we were born into a system that was in debt the day we were born. To who? You know, it really is black magic, I would suggest, Sven, because our minds go into the dark over it. It's magic. It's a type of evil, sick Babylonian magic, because that's where it springs from, this charging of interest on loans. We're going back thousands of years, and there's a whole line of it throughout history. And even mentioning the Dutch thing, you know, the glorious revolution. It was glorious for them. It's just more bunk. It's absolute bunk. Yeah, they only brought him in because they said, we'll put you in, we'll get you in, right? William, Billy Boy, Mr. Orange, we'll get you in, but you've got to give us the license to the Bank of England and allow us to create all the money. And it only took him, 6 years? So 1688 he's put in, and 1694, Bank of England gets put into law, and inside 5 years they'd already created £3 million more than existed and were causing a run on the bank. I mean, look, where's that? You remember that great BBC series about this? No, because they've never made one, and they never will. Anybody on the production team would be threatened. It is a bit of a madness.
isn't it, is to have a look at the countries that don't have central banks. Venezuela was one of them. They didn't have a central bank. Iran, that was another.
Yeah.
Syria, Iraq. Can you see the theme?
Oh, no, I can't. Spell it out for me, Sven, will you? Please spell it out. I can't see it. Yeah. Yeah.
I think when Trump went into Venezuela, Nathan Rothschild patted him on the back on Twitter, like, well done, Trump. Yeah, setting up another bank. What you were saying there about the solution would be to add another pound into the system. I think that's what they did with quantitative easing, but they paid the pound to the banks. Like what it should have done is that money should have gone to the general public, so it would go into circulation, so it would get spent in the local shops. But it didn't. It just went straight back to the banks. That's what bailing the banks out was, because there wasn't enough money in the system to pay the interest. They just had to create some. That's quantitative easing, which is what they're still doing. I mean, really, you just have to get the interest out of it. What they used to do, because obviously you want to get some return on your money. If you've got capital, you want a return on it. So what the banks would do when they had lots of capital, which they could invest for their customers who'd said, yes, you can invest this, they would, and somebody would come up with a business plan, and they would say, right, well, we'll lend you the money for the business plan, and we expect to get a percentage of the profits. You know, if the ships get beached and all the produce falls out at sea, the bank loses the money. You don't have to pay that back, because there's a risk being taken there by the bank, and the risk is being taken by the businessman. That's what isn't there anymore. And the second part of it is you've now got payday loans and people borrowing money just to buy the things that they need. And that's the equivalent of saying to somebody, well, can I borrow your coat? And you say, yes, you can borrow my coat, but you need to pay me back the coat and a hat as well, which is effectively what adding interest to loans to people that need it like that. So we used to have something that was called being charitable, which would mean that a noblesse oblige. So the aristocrats would be obliged to help out those less fortunate than them. And that's what Boxing Day is that we've just had. It's about charity boxes and helping out the poor. The aristocracy would help out the poor, and that was called being charitable. And now we've corporatized this as well, and now we have charities. So you're no longer charitable. You don't expect the rich to be charitable. You have charities, which are these great big businesses which pay managing directors huge amounts of money, where most of the money that's actually being given to the charity goes on these costs and these business costs, and it's just run like a business, rather than having interaction and having the rich actually helping out the poor. That's the way that it should be. That's the way that it used to be. So that the whole system has changed. I mean, one of the things I think about is with evolution, the theory of evolution, everything is supposed to get gradually more and more complex and more complicated and better and better and better. And that wasn't the ancients' way of thinking. The ancients' way of thinking was that everything started off perfect, and you had a golden age, a silver age, and a bronze age. Mm-hmm. We're now in the age of mud. And that, to me, seems far more believable. That's what we observe. We observe people thousands of years ago being able to memorize massive pieces of text just by memory. And we find it difficult today just to remember a phone number. So I think years ago, we were far more advanced mentally, and probably also with the technology that we had that we've lost. And then today, everything gets more and more degenerated. Yes. I mean, it talks about it in the Vedas as well, about these different ages, and how in the last age, man we won't have a friend anymore. Even his wife won't be his friend. You know, there won't be any more brotherly love, anything like that, and you won't be able to trust anyone. And that's effectively the situation that we're in today. So the usury and the rest of it, that all plays into that. But the ray of hope from it is that the more degenerate it gets, the more multiculturalism there is, the more ethnocentric people become, the more they wake up to these things. And, you know, you get a final straw that broke the camel's back, and they say, look, this is wrong. I'm going to stand up I want to speak about this. I'm going to stand up to this. And that's why you end up with so many people out on the streets now protesting, particularly at the migrant hotels, where the government are filling them up with claimed refugees. And just the numbers of people doing that, the numbers of people putting flags up, even the people that are supporting Tommy Robinson. I mean, he can pull like hundreds of thousands of people to London. Yes, they're civic nationalists, but they're basically standing up and saying, we've had enough of this. So that's the other side to it. The worse it gets, the more of an awakening there is among the people, I think.
I agree. Of course, there is that argument. We want it to get worse so that everybody wakes up. I don't know whether I subscribe to that. I just think, can't you put the kettle on? And we've got in our treasure chest the answers to all of the things, all the problems that we're facing. But the treasure chest is no treasure at all if people don't go down there and open it up. But that's a kind of negative. On a positive, the COVID thing has stirred a lot of people up into, let's loosely call it, this space. They're at different levels of duration in this space. There are people still coming into it, and they're going to continue. There are lots of young people coming in. I meet them from time to time. People are asking questions in their 20s that I never had to ask or would have ever even occurred to me in the 1980s. I was just busy working in a marketing company and having a good time, sort of. I was broke, I think, most of the time, but then I think most of us can say that. But, overall, there was a sense of positivity about building stuff. Now, the whole idea of a future and building a family is not possible, and the reasons given are all bogus. They're all bogus. None of the sort of logic, supposedly, that's presented by the news stands up to even cursory examination, which is why you don't get any, because it falls apart. It's not it's not based on sound engineering principles, and it seems, I'm being pedantic about it, but engineers make things that do what they say they're going to do. That's basically what an engineer, it builds a thing and says, this is a bridge. It's going to stand for 10 years. After that, you've got to maintain it. If not, I can't guarantee it's standing up. Here's the maintenance schedule. If you maintain it, it'll stand for 150. Right? Okay, got it. Right? And if it does that, you go, there's a guy that knows what he's talking about, and we can rely on him to build railway systems or whatever it is. We build a lot of good stuff, but the benefits of these things that are built don't improve the quality of family life because usury. And it gives them, doesn't it? It gives them a constant stream of drama to justify their position. Oh, we're going to sort this out. You're going, no, you're not, because you're not an engineer. You can't sort it out. Don't you insult me. I'm a politician. I know what I'm talking about. You don't. And this is why we don't have these conventions where we can actually let them know. It's not a matter of belittling them. We couldn't belittle them any more than they already are. They're very dangerous because their hubris and their confidence far exceeds their grasp. They're literally incompetent people. We've got some magnificent people, all nations have, who are not in charge of being the good stewards of the nation because this system, and as they move into it, they get bought off. They just get bought off. They lose their souls and they're gone. It's tricky. It's a very mature system of sort of subjugating a people. It starts even with the university types. They pick the best of the brains. They end up working for bloody investment banks. A lot of them.
You don't get the best of the brains anymore. Because engineering principles is white supremacy, isn't it?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Inclusive.
Am I in trouble?
You have to decolonize it. Yeah. You can't have all these white people doing it. It's a white thing, isn't it? You need to get rid of all the whiteness. That's the way that the universities are now. It's not promoting quality anymore. If the quality is associated with white people, then we don't want quality, do we? And that's effectively what it is, because you've got white people that have an average IQ of 100. You've got black Africans with an average IQ of 70. Some of them are under that. You've got Middle East, average IQ of 85. Clearly, the people with the average IQ of 100, and IQ is the best predictor of life outcomes, whether people are going to succeed or not. And clearly, people with an average IQ of 100 are going to have more geniuses up there in 125, 135, and they're going to invent things. And that's just the way that it is. But then when the anti-racism campaigners look at that, they say, well, this is all white supremacy. It's all filled with white people. And since everybody's all created the same, it must be racism that's kept all these budding nuclear engineers from Soweto and from Somalia. It must be racism that's just kept them all out of the country and kept them all from creating these wonderful inventions. Yep. So this is the other side of it, which is making ourselves more and more stupid. Basically, I mean, I noticed that when I was at school and my younger siblings went to school, and I was thinking stuff I was doing was much harder than the stuff you're doing. And then I was talking to my uncles and aunts, and like what they did in O level was the equivalent of what people were doing in degrees when I was a teenager. And looking at it now, the stuff that they're teaching now in university, it's stuff that I did when I was 13 or 14 years old, secondary school. Everything has to be dumbed down to the lowest common denominator. So
that's not by accident, is it? That's definitely not by accident. We did a show here about 6 months back or something about edumacation, I think we called it, right? We had some exam papers from England in the 1860s and one from America about 1880 odd, right? It's one exam. 14-year-old boys and girls sat this exam. There were like 50 questions in it over 3 sheets of paper. The questions were mind-blowingly tough. They were 14, right? So they had, 6 years of education? I don't know, 7 or 8 or something like that. These were literate. The quality of the way that the question was presented was exacting and precise and crystal clear in terms of its instruction set. So the quality and the use of the language was exceptional in comparison to what you see today. It's grunting. And of course, you could say, well, more people are writing than before because they're sending tweets out. 34 characters? Ugh, ugh. In the speed of everything. You were saying there about in the past people being able to retain huge books in their heads and pass it down around the campfire, which is absolutely true. I mean, of course, it wasn't all people, but all tribes seem to have their wise men and their wise women who were in the vanguard of holding on to that. To some degree, it's disappeared, I think, because technology has sped up things to such a degree that people's attention span has naturally been reduced. So the idea of thoughtful thinking over several hours. I mean, there were certain lessons at school I used to dread. I hated chemistry because I hated the chemistry teacher, but chemistry is really fascinating, I think. I think if I'd have had a good teacher, I'd have got into it. But this was detailed stuff, and I've got some of my A-level papers, and I probably couldn't answer them now or whatever. But at the time, you go through this kind of rigor. And, of course, you can argue it from the other side. You can say, well, look, it's all regimentation. You're all thinking uniformly. And, of course, this is true as well. But exceptional students see through that anyway. And there are also people with an attitude problem, and I was one of them. And I think you probably were too. It's like, I don't buy that. I won't argue with the teacher all the time, but there's certain things that they said, I just go, that's bunk. I'm not having that. And even if you're wrong, sometimes being an obdurate, stubborn cuss is a really good support for you, because you get to sort of stand or fall on your own stupidity, and it's a great teacher. But if you take that away from people, you end up with this sort of conformist stuff, and it's all about the pursuit of equality, Sven, isn't it? This condition that no one's ever yet seen, that's unachievable, that nature doesn't provide. It provides the complete opposite of that, hierarchies, as you said earlier. It's the pursuit of excellence, and you will get elites. Some people go, they're terrible, they're evil. No, they're not. They didn't used to be. A true aristocracy is a great boon, but it's been warped, it's been corrupted, and so it becomes a great menace. It's the same, there's nothing new that we're talking about. It's what happened to Rome, it's happened to all of them, it's happening to us right now. It's something to be avoided if you can. I suppose these conversations are, how do we avoid this? Can we get it back in the bag? It's a great thing to think about, but that's not much of a plus, is it, when you're actually surrounded by the results of all this real profoundly systematic, stupid thinking that's taking place. They can't think properly. I include myself at times. When you're feeling a bit dumb and you go, why am I so stupid? But at least I recognize it. I think many people don't even recognize how dense they are. I just said, was that hurtful? Has somebody started crying out there? I hope not. I don't want to upset people, but it's true, I think.
I think one of the ways you can see the difference between today and years gone by, if you look at something that was built about 150 years ago, before they had bricks that were all factory built and all the same size, they all had to be hand shaped, and they're all different sizes. And you look at a building that's been put together out of stones, and every stone is a different size, and yet they've got a perfectly angled, horizontal, vertical, beautiful looking building. And that was just normal buildings. That would be like sewage depots, prisons, places that today, that like one of the prisons I went to just seemed to be made out of sheet metal. It was awful. But the first prison that I went to in Swansea, it was built about 150 years ago, and it was every stone on it was a different size. It was a really, really well built, building from the time when people put effort into these things. You look at things that were made 150 years ago, that were handmade, you could see all the effort that's gone into them and the time that it must have taken to actually make these things. People used to make their own clothes, they used to make their own cutlery, they used to make their own bowl, plates, furniture, all sorts of things people used to just actually make for themselves, and they used to be really well decorated. Whereas today, everything's just factory made, super quick, super fast, and we're all just seen as cogs in the machine, all just trying to make money for the system. Whereas what it should be is the economy should serve the people. The people shouldn't be there to serve the economy. And one of the measures that you can have of wealth is like physical wealth. That's always been a measure of how successful a person was, which used to be linked to how intelligent they were, how industrious they were. Once you allow user into the system, you get people with vast amounts of wealth that haven't got there by being industrious, haven't got there by being super intelligent, and they may have got there through corrupt means. So a lot of our elites now, they are corrupt because they've managed to get to the top of the system by being corrupt. And the way to avoid all of this, I think, is, if we just stuck to biblical law effectively. And some people will say, well, oh, what's all this love your neighbor? I'm talking about like Old Testament law. It gives all the laws of how to have a functioning society.
Yes.
It doesn't include allowing in foreigners for a start, or allowing your daughters or your sons to marry the daughters or sons of a strange god, and it bans usury, and it tells you how you should treat the people around you, and it tells you how to set up a political system and set up a state. And it says, and if you obey all these laws, like long will be your years, and happy will you be in the land that the Lord has given you. If you break these laws, then you'll be ruled by children, you'll be ruled by women, you'll be overrun by foreigners. I mean, these are all the things that it says in the Bible that will happen if you break these laws.
Well, they're happening, aren't they? Right now.
Yeah.
They're happening right now. Yeah. Yeah. It's because it's the law. It's not the law because we say it is. It's the law because the physical universe, which is an expression of the Creator, works like this. Here's the rule book. This is how it works. You do this, you're going to have a great time. Well, not always great. You'll have some challenges, but here's how you deal with the challenges. But if you don't do that, you'll wither. And we're withering. We're a rearguard action. We're the Marshal Ney of the white people, Sven, and everybody here. We're fighting this great rearguard action. We might not currently have sight of a victory, but we're preserving as much as we possibly can. I think, you're talking about old-fashioned workmanship as well. I go into charity shops, loads of people around here, because it's a reasonably gentrified area. There's some fantastic furniture for really cheap prices, handmade stuff. And I suppose maybe younger people don't want it. They want to get what's from IKEA. I don't have a big enough house to buy all this stuff. And it's not that I'm furniture obsessed, but I notice that's taking place. The old stuff is just better made. It just is. That's it, really. So I don't think we're being overly nostalgic. I think there's a yearning to restore that. There is. And I think it's developing at great speed. I really do. And I think there's all sorts of actions that we can take. Anyway, look, we're just about out of time here. Let people know where they can catch you with your future, now that you're at Freedom, communication work. Where can people get your work, and what are you up to? Because we've got about a minute and a half here.
Yeah, just at radioalbion.com. If you go on radioalbion.com, we've got all our podcasts up there. If you click on the name in the podcast article, if you click on my name, it will come up with all my different social media accounts, Telegram, Twitter, Gab, VK. Sign up to follow them. We've got a chat room there as well. Could do with getting more people in the chat room. We've got, it's Rocket Chat, so we've got different chat rooms in there for music, science, history, all that sort of thing. Plus, we put all the Radio Albion content up there. If you're into getting involved in physical things, then I recommend joining up with Patriotic Alternative. I'm in Patriotic Alternative Wales, and we're getting that moving again, because that sort of slowed down a bit while I was in prison. I was quite an active member of PA Wales, doing all the events organising. So if people want to do cultural outings, or they want to go protesting, join Patriotic Alternative. And if you want to keep up to date with the conversation and what's going on in the news, check out the Daily Nationalist on Radio Albion. We've also got Dr. Matthew Raphael Johnson there, who does the Orthodox Nationalist. and Grandpa Dan, and we also republish all patriotic alternative stuff there as well. So yeah, just go to radioalbion.com. It's all on there, all on that website. And thank you very much for inviting me on, Paul. I appreciate it.
I've really enjoyed it, Sven. It's flown by. 2-hour show. It was fantastic. It was great that you could get the time to do this and that we did it. It was a little challenge for me as well, which I quite enjoyed. Not that I'm going to go on about that. There will be a show on Thursday, everybody, so we'll be back here again 8 o'clock on Thursday. Have a good couple of days. Lots to talk about. Sven Longshanks, tonight's guest. Cracking show. Really enjoyed it. And check all this work out there at radioalbion.com. We'll see you all on Thursday. Bye for now.